Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Monday, November 23rd, 2020. On today's episode, we're going to discuss the latest film and TV news. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And writer Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
Okay, let's dive into it. We have a week of film news to catch up on, and let's start first with Black Panther 2, which apparently is going to start filming in summer of next year and has cast possibly the big villain. Ben, what do we know?
Yes. So, as soon as Chadwick Boseman died, tragically and surprisingly earlier this year, we all sort of assumed that Marvel Studios was going to essentially put the brakes on Black Panther 2 for a little while until they figured out the best way to move forward without that franchise's lead star. But evidently they've already figured things out, or at least to such a degree that they've decided to, that they're going to ramp up production on the sequel. So it was set to begin filming in, I believe, March of next year. And now it's actually going to start production in July of 2021 in Atlanta, where Marvel films a lot of their blockbusters. And the shoot is expected to last for upwards of 6 months, which I feel like is kind of a long time. I didn't do like a full breakdown of the shooting schedules for every single Marvel movie, but I know that the original Black Panther filmed for less than 4 months. So sort of a longer comparatively shoot there. And then sort of in addition to that news, they announced that a Mexican actor named Tenoch Huerta, I believe is how you pronounce his name, is going to be playing one of the antagonists of the movie. And there's no word yet about who exactly that is going to be. But the report from the Hollywood Reporter said that it is one of the film's antagonists. So this sort of leads me to believe that there are going to be, multiple in this movie. And there tend to be, at least a couple in every big comic book movie, whether or not they're, on the same tier, or even like in Black Panther, for example, like you had Andy Serkis's character who was kind of a villain, but he was like a lower tier than Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger, for example. So we're not really sure really anything about, who this actor could be playing in this movie.
Are there any Mexican villains in the Black Panther series?
I don't know.
I don't have... Yeah.
I was just looking at a list of Black Panther antagonists, and there's one called Kyber the Cruel, who's a scientist who gained the ability to absorb the psionic consciousness / life forces of human beings. So that one sounds like it could be, race neutral, I guess. So I don't know. I that's like wild speculation on my part that this person might be playing Kyber the Cruel, but I have no idea.
And I think we saw a report last week saying that they weren't going to try to bring back Chadwick Boseman with like CG, right? So
the thing about that is the versions that I read is that they're not going to use a CGI Boseman to create like a full performance of the character, like for the entire movie. I don't know if that means that a CGI Chadwick Boseman is completely off the table. And, because there's a big difference between doing it for the entire movie and then doing it for like a shot or a couple shots or something like that. So I'm very curious to see what they're going to do here. I mean, obviously the whole, we talked a lot about Chadwick Boseman when he passed, and that whole situation is so tragic, but just like, trying to put that aside for a second and just thinking about it from a pure, I guess, business perspective or future of this franchise perspective or whatever. It's like
what storytelling perspective.
Yeah, storytelling. Like what are they going to do here? And other franchises have had to deal with this recently. You saw Carrie Fisher in Star Wars Rise of Skywalker. So or a digital version of her. So it seems like it's not going to be that, but I just wonder, what the full approach is going to be here.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, and it's very strange that they're able to pivot so quickly in making this movie. Like, it's just a few months, right? Delay.
Yeah, 4 months.
So, like,
yeah.
So, I mean, like, what do you have? Like, the beginning of the movie, like, who was that was rumored? Like, Namor or something?
Namor the Submariner. Yeah, there was a reference in Avengers Endgame about some earthquakes that were happening below sea level, and some folks were wondering if Namor the Submariner, this sort of underwater, I guess, Marvel's version of Aquaman, kind of, but he's kind of a villain, I guess, is maybe going to show up in Black Panther 2, because those characters go head to head in the comics frequently, from what I understand. So I guess it's possible still. And I know that Kevin Feige was talking about, the possibility of Namor like years and years ago, when that character was still belonged to Universal. So I'm not sure if there's still rights issues tied up with that character, if all that stuff has been resolved, but I guess it's a possibility.
Yeah. Like I just imagine he's gonna like show up in the beginning of the film and like Black Panther's gonna end up dying in a big battle, and then Shuri's gonna have to come in to. I mean, like, is there any other way of doing this? I'm not even sure. I'm not sure there is a way of doing it other than Shuri taking the mantle or taking the title, right? Of Black Panther.
In the comments for our piece, a lot of people were talking about, they should just recast the part, and I mean, I guess that's an option. It seems so strange to consider that. I guess since we're still so relatively close to Boseman's passing, it just feels weird for them to like move on in that way. But I guess that is an option.
The other thing that seems so weird about this is like it seems like with Disney, with the theatrical experience being what it is right now during this pandemic, Marvel is investing heavily in Disney Plus and stuff, and it seems like it would be so easy to just put this franchise on the back burner for a little while until they can figure it out. But like, it seems so strange that they're going, they're diving right into it.
Yeah, so, and I would assume that like Ryan Coogler, who is still writing and directing this movie, would have. Like, it's just so surprising that he would, I guess, evidently have a take that is that can be molded, to fit the loss of Chadwick Boseman so easily. So yeah, I'm very curious to see what they do.
Yeah, let's talk about the other side of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that is Thor: Love and Thunder, which apparently is going to be like a new Avengers sequel. Chris, what does that mean?
I don't know, and we don't even really know what this means as a whole. But there was a THR report about the Black Panther story that Ben just talked about last week, and in that report, they also just casually tossed off this line that insiders, quote unquote, say that Thor: Love and Thunder has an Avengers 5 feel thanks to its ensemble. So that kind of suggests this might end up, following in the footsteps of like Captain America's Civil War, which wasn't technically an Avengers movie, but still had pretty much everyone from the MCU in it. And, Thor: Love and Thunder is already, it has Thor, obviously, but it's also announced recently that Chris Pratt's Star-Lord was going to be in it. And this kind of suggests they're going to add even more MCU players into the mix. And that would kind of make sense too, because, even Thor Ragnarok brought in, like Hulk and stuff like that. So it just sounds like they're going to at least have more than usual MCU crossover potential for this sequel.
This is so strange because knowing the story that is at the, that's being adapted here for Thor and Love and Thunder, like it's basically Natalie Portman's character gets the hammer, right?
Right. She becomes the female Thor.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't see how that becomes an ensemble thing. Like, Civil War intrinsically in its like concept is an ensemble thing. I don't know. Right, it's just like, I don't know how you expand this, but interesting. We'll have to see. Okay, let's talk about last week. Universal and Cinemark struck a deal for a shortened theatrical window. Ben, what do we know?
Yeah, so earlier this year, like as the pandemic was sort of kicking into higher gear, Universal signed a deal with AMC. That was back in July. And now Universal has signed another deal with Cinemark, which is the third most popular movie theater chain in the US behind AMC and Regal. There are, I think, three important things to note here. The first thing is that every theatrical release from Universal and Focus Features is going to get a 17-day theatrical window. So that's number one. Number two is if any of those movies open to more than $50 million at the domestic box office, the theatrical window gets extended out from 17 days to 31 days. And then number three is after, that period is done, depending on how that film performs, Universal will then be able to choose whether to take those films direct, or move them essentially to premium video on demand, or keep them in theaters for longer, or a combination of both. And Cinemark, the theater chain, is going to receive a percentage of the money made through the PVOD stream. So it's very similar to the AMC deal, the terms of that deal. The only difference here, as far as I can tell, is that they're laying down a threshold for films to cross with this $50 million domestic box office opening. And for context, I think it's going to be a while before any movie hits $50 million theatrically in an opening weekend at the domestic box office. I think I should have pulled this up right beforehand, but I want to say I saw some tweets and stuff going around this past, in the past few days, essentially saying that Freaky, the new Universal movie, I think was like #1 at the box office, and it opened to like under $5 million or something. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it's going to be a while before, enough theaters are going to be open, enough people are going to be willing to go back to theaters for any film to generate $50 million in its opening weekend. So all this stuff is sort of, to me, it feels like Universal and Cinemark are looking forward here and not necessarily trying to do something that is like a, putting a Band-Aid on the Hoover Dam kind of situation where they're trying to figure out how to do something right this second. It's kind of, this deal is a multi-year deal. So this is going to be, with them for a little while.
Wow. I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is like do Universal's movies, like, do they typically make over $50 million on opening weekend? Like, I'm looking.
Well, you got Fast and Furious. Those are huge openers.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other franchises that Universal has, and I cannot come. Oh, like they have a lot of animated stuff. I think they release the Illumination Entertainment movies. I feel like those are all released through Universal. Yeah. So those are big money makers as well. So,
but even a film like Jason Bourne, which I know is a bad example, I guess that made $59 million opening weekend. So it's possible, like in pre-pandemic times. But I think, to your point, Ben, I don't think we're going to see that even with like the biggest of the big for over a year at this point.
Yeah, I guess it all depends on vaccines and how quickly people are ready to get back to theaters and all that stuff. Yeah, it's definitely going to be several months before any of those things are reasonable expectations, I think.
Yeah. What effect do you think this will have post-pandemic? Like, do you think all the movie theaters are going to follow suit and like allow this to be the new normal?
I don't know. I was wondering about this because I'm surprised really that it took this long for this deal to happen, because this just happened. And like I said, that AMC deal happened back in July. So the fact that it is happening now, that it's more than just a one-off now leads me to think that some of these other, it takes a long time for decisions like this to go through like a corporate bureaucracy and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm wondering now if other theater chains and things like that are going to jump on the bandwagon here. Because I think, everything is so uncertain. Like, what does the future of movie theaters look like once this thing is done? Are they going to be able to we've spent so much time talking about like, are they going to be able to survive until the pandemic is done? But sort of looking beyond that, like, what do they look like after it's over? At least for the next few years, it's going to look a lot like this deal, I think, because the AMC deal is a multi-year thing as well.
Yeah, it's strange. 700 movie theaters closed over the weekend. Here in California, where I live, most of California went into the purple tier, which means the movie theaters had to close. I'm wondering how movie theaters are going to come out of this. Like, I felt a little bit more optimistic, a couple months ago when things were, on the decline. But now I'm really not sure what the future of movie theaters are. But we're gonna find out. Late last week, we had some surprising news, and that is 10 Cloverfield Lane director Dan Trachtenberg is making a new Predator movie. Chris, tell us about that.
So this is going to be a new Predator film. It doesn't seem like it's going to have anything to do with the previous Predator film, which was called The Predator, and it was directed by Shane Black and was kind of a disappointment to everyone. So this isn't like that. It's just a new entry. It's not a reboot. It just sounds like it's a new Predator movie. And interestingly enough, Dan Trachtenberg got on social media and said that this was kind of supposed to be a surprise, and it kind of sounds like it was a approach they took with I don't know if anyone remembers this at this point, but a little while ago there was a new Blair Witch sequel from director Adam Wingard, and for a long time it was being advertised. There were trailers and everything as just The Woods, and then shortly before it was released, they were like, surprise, we were just kidding. This is actually a new Blair Witch movie. And it kind of sounds like that's what they were trying to do with this movie, because a few years ago, 2019, actually, not that long ago, word broke that Dan Trachtenberg was making a movie called Skulls, which was about, quote, a Comanche woman who goes against gender norms and traditions to become a warrior. And that film has the same screenwriter, Patrick Azen, who is also writing this new Predator movie. So it really sounds like they were trying to keep this on the down low and make a secret Predator movie, and they were unable to keep it a secret for very long, because now we all know what this is.
Yeah, and Dan Trachtenberg, obviously he made 10 Cloverfield Lane. That has a female protagonist. This has a female protagonist, at least judging by this Skull's plot synopsis. And it's going from it, like, the gender norms and that thing, it feels like they're kind of going for more of a, like, Chris, I know you hate this word, but elevated take on the Predator franchise.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds different. There haven't been... if you don't count the Alien versus Predator movies, which people don't tend to count those as part of the main Predator series, there hasn't really been like a female driven Predator movie. Like, there have been female characters in the movies, but they're very much male driven, stories. So this definitely sounds like a change of pace. I'm not really sure how the Predator fits in with that plot line, but I guess we'll wait and see.
Yeah, the other surprising thing is that this is coming from, Disney now owns Fox, and Fox owns Predator.
Right.
So is it surprising that Disney would want to make a Predator movie?
I do, I was a little worried with the big, Fox Disney deal. And to be clear, I still don't think it was a good thing. It was a big monopoly sort of thing that isn't great. But I was worried that Disney was going to try and shut down more of the adult driven Fox titles, but so far they really haven't been doing that. So, knock on wood, it doesn't seem like Disney is going to be too strict with, their adult driven releases from Fox, or, I guess it's called 20th Century Studios now, and Searchlight Pictures and stuff like that. So to their credit, they haven't done that just yet.
Okay, probably the biggest news of last week was Wonder Woman 1984. We knew this was going to happen. It is going to... Well, it's not going to skip theaters. It's going to hit theaters. It just so happens it's going to hit, your TV set on the same day. Ben, tell us about it.
Yes. So Wonder Woman 1984, after months of being scheduled to hit theaters on Christmas Day, is actually going to stay on that release date. And as you mentioned, it is going to be playing in whatever movie theaters are open, I guess, and whatever theater chains decide to show the movie. And then it is also going to, directly to HBO Max on Christmas Day, I guess for quote unquote free to its subscribers. It's not like a Mulan Disney Plus situation where you have to pay extra. If you subscribe to or pay for HBO Max, you're just going to be able to watch Wonder Woman 1984 for free at home on Christmas Day. So I guess it's actually going to be only available on HBO Max in the US for a month, which I have not seen that, I guess reported as much recently, but that was from the official press release from HBO Max. And then
why do you think that is? Like, what is the deal there?
I'm not sure. I wonder if it has something to do with the contracts and the rights and like the, I don't know. I think there are so many of those kinds of decisions that like we as the, outsiders looking in don't have, we're not privy to. I feel like it has to have something to do with like, they will, once it is gone from HBO Max, they'll be able to send it to, Amazon and iTunes and wherever the hell, people normally pay to rent things, just so it's not solely living on HBO Max. That would be
Oh,
my
you're
guess.
right. So that's probably it. They probably struck deals to have like rental on different platforms beforehand, and they at the same time can't have it for free on their streaming service. Or,
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That would be my guess. And then it's also, I think, important to note that it is going to be debuting theatrically in international markets that don't have access to HBO Max, or where HBO Max has not, rolled out yet, on December 16th. So that's earlier than December 25th. So for people who are like super sensitive to spoilers and things like that, the movie is going to be out in theaters for certain segments of the world before it hits in the United States. So just be careful out there for anybody who's like, really trying to go into this movie completely spoiler free.
Do you think now that this has happened, do you think Marvel will follow suit with Black Widow?
Man, Black Widow is still a big question mark for me, because I don't know how much it ties in with the rest of the MCU, and like, all of that stuff is so interconnected. They've done such a good job of creating this net, and now like they've kind of strung themselves. They've kind of got caught in their own net to some degree because of the pandemic and all these delays and everything. So yeah, I'm very curious. I mean, I think Bob Chapek, who's the CEO of Disney, we were listening in on a call recently, and he was basically saying like the Mulan model is going to be utilized at some point moving forward. And I would not be surprised if they did that for Black Widow, like made people pay for that one, because they know that they can get a lot of money from people who want to see the new Marvel movie.
Yeah.
But it also depends, I think, on the vaccines and pandemic and all of that stuff. If they can open Black Widow in, I don't know, let's say October or November of 2021 and do it safely theatrically, maybe they'll still be able to make $1 billion and not have to, deal with the VOD aspect of it at all. I don't know.
And we've also heard that Disney might be considering pushing the premieres of some of their live action remakes to Disney Plus.
Yeah, so movies like Pinocchio, Peter Pan and Wendy, and Cruella, the one that stars Emma Stone, are in various stages of development. And yes, there is a lot of, internal talk and some reports and stuff that people at Disney are talking about moving those from theatrical releases straight to Disney Plus. Those movies going straight to Disney Plus would not have the same impact as something like Wonder Woman going straight to HBO Max, because Disney has already done this and is going to do it again with Soul coming up a month from now. But like I was just talking about, I wouldn't be surprised also if 1, 2, 3 of these movies are they drop them straight on Disney Plus, but force you to pay a little bit extra to see them too. So I really, the Mulan experiment, I think is not quite as open and closed as a lot of people would have you believe. I think, we're going to see a lot more of that from Disney in the future. It's just a matter of like when they strategically decide to, apply that tactic.
Yeah. Do you think the fact that Disney's considering pushing these premieres of these live action remakes to Disney Plus says anything about the confidence they have in those particular films or do you think it's just like, there's a certain kind of film that will perform well right now during this pandemic on a streaming service or, with this Mulan model. And that's probably like a very, high family friendly film, I'm guessing. Like, what do you think it is? Do you think there is a confidence issue in some of these, like that these couldn't hit like, Beauty and the Beast or Lion King levels of box office?
Yeah, because I think they've already done the big ones, right? Like we've talked about this before. They're kind of like not scraping the bottom of the barrel yet, but definitely working with like lower tier material. And even though you have something like Pinocchio, which is starring Tom Hanks as Geppetto and is directed by Robert Zemeckis, I mean, those are like big names. It's a reunion for the Castaway guys. Like, theoretically, that should be kind of a big deal. There's just something about it that feels a little lesser than to me. And yeah, I think that's are the kids these days, let's pretend the pandemic is not happening for a second. Are the kids these days really going to like be, psyched to go out and pay money to see a Robert Zemeckis movie starring Tom Hanks, but it's Pinocchio? Like, is Pinocchio a character that people give a shit about in the year 2020? I don't know.
Not to mention, has anyone seen Robert Zemeckis' movies lately?
Right.
I don't think they're anything worth getting excited about anymore at this point.
Right. So,
but I'll say this: poor Robert Zemeckis. If this happens, this will be the second film in a row that was supposed to go into theaters that will end up going straight to TV, right?
Yeah,
because he had The Witches, right?
With the Witches, yes.
Yeah. So, okay, we'll have to keep an eye out on that. We've had a couple stories hit this past week involving the Scream franchise. There's a new Scream movie that just finished filming. And I think we're all very not sure what is this movie? How is this going to fit into the grand picture of the Scream franchise? Chris, do we know anything more?
Right. So there's a little confusion about the new Scream movie. Technically it's Scream 5, but it's just called Scream. And that sort of,
by the way, how much do you hate that?
I don't mind it that much. I know a lot of people are annoyed by it. I'm nonplussed. I would have liked if it had a different title, but I'm not gonna. I'll wait to reserve judgment. But it does open the film up to some questions. It's bringing back original cast members: Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, David Arquette. They're all coming back, but by calling it Scream, it kind of suggests that they could be trying to take the same route as 2018's Halloween, which was a sequel, but was also a reboot in the sense that it brought back Jamie Lee Curtis and it was a direct sequel to the first film, but it just ignored all the other sequels. So it was both sequel / reboot. And some people are wondering, is this new Scream going to be trying to do sort of the same thing? And the film's directors, whose names I can never pronounce right, Matt Bettinelli, Open, and Tyler Gillette. I apologize if I butchered those names, but they're making the new film, and they gave an interview where they didn't come right out and say, yes, 100%, this is a sequel to all 4 films, but they gave a comment that sort of really implies that. I'm not going to read the whole comment, but they said, so for us, it felt like the only way to do this right was to create connectivity. And a lot of that is also just what the Scream movies are. They're about lineage. They're about the evolution of pop culture and the evolution of the genre. And you can't have something new without also giving a nod to what came before it and paying respect and giving a bow to what followed. So I kind of read that as, yes, this is a sequel to all 4 previous films, but they sort of phrase it in this sort of tap dancey way where they're like, it's a nod to the films that came before it, which kind of gives them a little wiggle room if they want to ignore some things. But I do think it sounds like this isn't going to be the same thing as Halloween, where they only acknowledge the first film and they ignore everything else. This does sound like it's going to really be Scream 5 and not just sequel / reboot Scream.
What if they treat the previous films as it's the stab films in this universe? Do you know what I mean? Those are the movies based off what happened and not all the stuff happened, and that's how you get to bring Jamie Kennedy back because he never died.
Yeah, I wish I remember who I saw say it, but I saw someone on Twitter theorize that I think it might have been Rob Savage, the guy who directed Host. But it was someone who said that they're theorizing that in the Scream universe, they're rebooting the Stab franchise, and the Stab franchise is now called Scream. And that's why this new movie is called Scream. And I don't know if that's right. And, but I was like, that's a neat idea if that's what they're doing. So, who knows what they're doing.
The other thing is, last week, I think Kevin Williamson had some kind of quote where he said that this one wouldn't have the deconstruction or self-awareness of the previous films.
Right. He sort of, he was asked if he were making a new Scream movie, what would he do? And he said, and he was like, I would have it not be, as meta as that is. But he also didn't 100% say that's what they were doing with this film. So he sort of implied it, but it's also important to remember he's not writing this new movie, so that's sort of like his advice, but not exactly what they're doing. But who knows?
What
Who
would a
knows
Scream
what
film? Yeah, but what would a Scream film be without the deconstruction and self-awareness? Like, isn't that part of the charm of the Scream franchise?
I don't know. I mean, yes, the Scream franchise is very much about characters who are aware of how horror movies work and stuff like that. So you kind of need that in there. At the same time, Kevin Williams's full comments, they kind of made it sound like, we've done that so many times now. There's been 4 movies, not to mention countless movies that sort of took that idea and ran with it, that it doesn't really seem fresh anymore. So I kind of see where he's coming from, but yeah, I don't really know how you make a Scream movie. And you can't have like 100% serious Scream movie, I guess is what we're all trying to say here. Like, it can't be like this really dark, it can't be like Hereditary. It can't be like this bleak, hopeless modern day horror. It has to somehow be, winking at the audience in some context.
Actually, while we're here, I want to get your take on this, Chris, because, I'm a huge fan of Scream 1. And I think what it really does well is it plays with our expectations of the horror movie genre, and it references certain horror movies, and then it subverts them in interesting and fun ways. The sequels for me, I do like them, I think, more than most people like them. But one of the problems to me is it's, instead of referencing horror films or deconstructing horror films, it's kind of referencing itself.
Right.
It's becoming too meta. Do you agree or do you disagree there?
I do think, especially Scream 3, which I think is like the weakest of the sequels, it did get to this point where it was like constantly like pointing out stuff from, its own past. And so I do think they sort of ran into that trouble. That said, I really loved Scream 4. I thought Scream 4 was a really interesting take. And Scream 4, it kind of did what The Force Awakens did before The Force Awakens came out, where it was like a sequel where the original characters just kept showing up and being like, hey, remember us from the original franchise? So I thought that was like a really neat idea. And a lot of movies kind of took that and ran with it, not just Force Awakens, but the Creed franchise, which took, the Rocky series and spun it. So I kind of feel like Scream 4 doesn't get enough credit for being one of the first films in this new era to do that, because a lot of people don't talk about it in that same breath, and I feel like they should.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the Creed franchise, the director of Creed 2 is going to be embarking on a Transformers movie of sorts. Ben, tell us about it.
Yes, Stephen Cable Jr., who directed Creed 2, is going to be directing a new Transformers film. That is the news. We're not even sure what this movie is going to be or which person is going to be writing it, because earlier at the beginning of this year, I think it was back in January, Paramount hired 2 different writers to create 2 different takes on the Transformers mythos, and they're developing both of those scripts at the same time, and then they're going to ultimately choose one, and I guess they're just going to hand whichever one they choose over to Stephen Cable Jr. to direct. So that's where we are right now.
Remember when they had a writer's room for the Transformers franchise, like Michael Bay, and they had 10 writers in there, and they had planned the next 100 years of, I'm kidding, 10 years of Transformers movies, and I think 2 of those got mushed together into Michael Bay's last Transformers movie, and then I think everything was scrapped. So
I think Bumblebee came out of there, so that was, I guess, good. But yeah, it was there was so much made about the writer's room for that, and then now it's like they're hiring people who one guy who wasn't even involved with that, and then one of the scripts was from James Vanderbilt, who I believe was part of that writer's room. And in terms of what this movie might potentially be about, there was a report earlier this year that James Vanderbilt, who wrote The Amazing Spider-Man and Zodiac and a bunch of other stuff, that he was working on something that would basically be a version of Transformers Beast Wars, which is set in the future of the original Transformers continuity. So I guess the Shia LaBeouf era. So like the future of that world, and then the Transformers have, I guess, evolved or descended from regular Transformers, regular Autobots and Decepticons into something called Maximals and Predacons. I don't know, guys. I'm just reading what this is.
They look like dinosaurs and stuff. I think we saw them in one of the Transformers, like the Michael Bay films. I remember playing with
those were Dinobots, maybe, but this is
this is something different.
So I think this is different, but yeah.
Oh, maybe I'm confused then.
It's very easy to get confused when you talk about the Transformers. Not only like the movies themselves, like literally what are you seeing on screen, because Michael Bay was so chaotic in the direction of those films, but like the mythology there, and like there were Transformers were involved with the moon landing and like all sorts of insane shit in those movies. So we don't know what this version is going to be that Stephen Cable Jr. is going to be directing, but best of luck to him, because whatever he gets handed, I feel like it's going to be ridiculous, and I hope he comes out of it okay.
What do you think of him as a director? Because I remember being blown away by the first Creed movie and then going into Creed 2 and being so disappointed. I'm not sure it's his fault necessarily, but like I don't feel like it's up to the caliber of that first Ryan Coogler. I mean, you're also comparing yourself to Ryan Coogler,
right?
So.
Yeah, and just like the energy level, like the first Creed felt like so vital because that idea was new, and the idea of the first Creed really feels like something that was conjured up in a studio boardroom by a bunch of executives trying to figure out how to resurrect a franchise. But that just all came from Ryan Coogler. Like and you could feel that passion in that full movie. And Creed 2 kind of felt like it. He did Stephen Cable Jr. did a fine job directing that movie. It just didn't have the inherent sense of energy and like that same passion of like this idea originated from him, and it has been burning as a like under his ass for days and days, or years and years rather, for him to be able to finally make this and like let this story out. It just felt like he was hired to direct this movie and did a fine job with what he was given. So it's kind of seems like it's going to be the same thing here, but I look forward to the day when we see, Stephen Cable Jr. actually directing something that, that he, like a passion project from him. I want to know like who he is as a filmmaker. I feel like those kinds of things tell us a lot.
Ben, you don't know. Little Stevie was probably playing with his Beast War toys, and like this is like his dream project.
It could be. Yes, that is very, that's very true, Peter. Who am I to say that that Beast Wars is anything lesser than anything else we've seen in the Transformers franchise so far?
Yes. Okay, that brings us to the end of today's Slash Film Daily. You can find more of all of our work at slashfilm.com. You can find links to the news items we mentioned on today's podcast in the show notes. You can find this podcast on Apple, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. And please head on over to our iTunes page, write us a review, give us a 5 stars, tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you on Wednesday.